Welcome to our Finance Committee meeting. Tonight we'll be reviewing the general government, police, fire, and general services, and there'll be a public hearing at the end. So with that, I'm going to recognize Mr. Manager to take us to general government. I believe you're going to start with the City Manager's Department. Is that correct?
Correct. And members of the council, tonight we'll review general government, police, fire, general services, and then have a public hearing at the end. The first item on your agenda is item number 4, general government, and that is on page 67. Is there? So that's where it starts. I'll start talking regarding page 69. We'll get right into the individual departments. City manager's budget, as you know. To all budgets items this year, you'll see more detail for the expense portion of each department's budget. In past years, we've presented the budget in summarized categories, and of course, you always have the detailed information, but now it's actually in the full budget. Starting with the 2024 budget, the expenses are broken down by individual expense lines, and you'll see this in all the departments, enterprise funds and special revenue funds. As you can see, all the previous year's histories has been entered in there. And directly to the city manager's budget, no revenues are budgeted in either fiscal year 23 or 24. However, you'll notice the $200,000 amount in the revised budget, which is the 3 opioid settlement checks that we received and then transferred into the opioid reserve. So those came in as revenues in this account. Expenses budget to budget are down $265,000 or 31% due to moving the economic development marketer and the director of redevelopment and downtown services positions and the related expenses for those from the city manager budgets and the community development budget as they revised portions of the approved by city council that you did at your April meeting. I'd be glad to answer any questions regarding the city manager.
What's questions for the manager regarding the city manager's budget? See none? Okay, we'll go to legal.
Next, you'll want to go to page 72. On page 72, revenues budget to budget are down $4,700 or 5.9% and are reflective of a zero budget for fines and court-ordered payments. And the governmental agencies line calls for a 1.8% increase to other communities for which we provide prosecutorial services. As you know, the city provides prosecutorial services for Bow, Dumbarton, and Loudoun. Expenses budget to budget are up $76,000 or 5.3%. This is mainly due to wage and benefit increases. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions on legal? I had a few, so actually could we probably bring up the prosecutor or our city solicitor?
Jim? Would you like the prosecutor too?
Absolutely.
Okay.
He needs more time on television.
That'd be great. Okay. I'll lean back.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of the Finance Committee. I'm
Welcome.
Jim Kennedy, and I believe many of you, or most of you, should all know our city prosecutor, Tracy Connolly.
Appreciate you coming up. So I had just had a couple things. So I noticed on the Appendix B, the change, program change request, you all asked for a part-time assistant city prosecutor that the managers chose not to fund, and perhaps you could kind of share with us why you chose not to fund that.
Well, we requested that, Your Honor, in part due to the extreme caseload that our prosecutors are currently experiencing, the heavy caseloads. The numbers out of our Concord District Court are the highest in the state this year, and that exceeds both Manchester and Nashua. Our attorneys right now, we have 4 full-time prosecuting attorneys right now. By way of comparison, in Manchester they have 7 full-time prosecuting attorneys, plus 2 police officers that conduct the prosecutions there as well. The same is in Nashua, where they've got 4 prosecuting attorneys and 2 police prosecuting officers there as well. So We're at 4, they're at 6, they're at 7, and our numbers right now are higher. Tracy, I asked her to, to the extent that this came up this evening, with respect to the change request to add an attorney, she has some additional information she can share.
And I brought some of, I went on the website and printed out the numbers, and I can just pass those around. We right now have 4 city prosecutors. As Jim mentioned, some of these smaller departments that have fewer numbers have more prosecutors and law enforcement helping out in the court system. We are, since March of 2023, our court docket has exploded. We're no longer in court 3 days a week. We're in court 4 days a week, all day. So there have been times when we go right through lunch. The court's now starting to break for lunch, but we have a morning docket and an afternoon docket on Monday, Tuesday, most Wednesday, and Thursday morning we're in court, and then Friday we usually have a spattering of cases. These cases are, because of the backlog, taking all different types. Their trials are really starting. The backlog of COVID has really put the court in a position where they're trying to get rid of that backlog, so they're scheduling a lot more trials. I've also printed out copies of what a typical week looks like for us. So
This is a lot of paper, Your Honor. But the reason we brought this, in case you brought us up here.
Please pass it out.
Yeah, it's a.
Go ahead.
So the city solicitor's office, we try to go paper-free, but we made the exception here just to demonstrate the magnitude of cases that they.
I like papers, there you go.
There you go. It's old world.
That's right. So just looking at this, what you just handed out real quickly, so we're literally #1 in criminal cases in the state?
in the state for circuit court, yes, and that doesn't include felonies first, which is about ready to break.
So that, maybe that's a nice segue. Well, actually, you were gonna talk about this, and then
Well, that just kind of gives you an idea of what our docket looks like on a weekly basis. So we have 4 prosecutors covering all that. And what that means is we're in court every day, almost all day, which doesn't leave a lot of time for the emergencies, the B-14s, the emergency arrest where somebody is being held, the emergency bail hearings. Those we have to struggle to get covered. Those are the kind of things that are. Oh, B-14 is a juvenile hearing, so if there's a juvenile that's been picked up and needs to be held, for whatever reason, if it's, usually in our case, it's a crime, but you don't call juvenile cases criminal cases or adjudication. So if we have a juvenile who's committed a pretty serious offense and he can't be placed back at home, then we have to have an emergency hearing, we call it B-14, and that's where we have to find placement or a secure facility for that juvenile. I would say in the last 2 weeks, we've had at least 2, and that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of patience to get through this information. It's usually someone who is just picked up by the police department, so we're working with the police department to get the petitions and to get the wording and to get the information. Then we have to work with the juvenile probation and parole officers to get all the information about, can we find a placement for them or do we have to go secure? Those are the kind of things that we struggle with that come up on a regular basis that we don't, because we've got our normal docket, we really are struggling to try to get coverage for.
So segue that into, explain to me, so I was talking to somebody at the county, and they were talking about how we're now gonna feel the burden from felonies first. Can you just take me back through even a little bit of history, if you will, because we had it, we didn't have it, and we're gonna have it again.
When we're gonna have it again, so felonies used to start in circuit court. If somebody was arrested on a felony, they'd be arraigned in circuit court.
The circuit court is where our prosecutors practice. So that typically the district court, the circuit court, that's where our prosecutors practice every day. And so felonies used to start there, and then, as you stated.
Felonies first came into place. The thought was that they would be handled quicker if they went directly to Superior Court rather than starting in District and Circuit Court and then eventually moving up to Superior Court. They're finding that isn't working. It's not quicker. They actually were handled a little bit more quickly in Circuit Court. We filtered out the cases that don't deserve felony level prosecutions and probably aren't going to be looking at prison time. We negotiated those down at our level and sent the cases that really need to be addressed in Superior Court up to Superior Court. So what that means is we're going to be getting all those felonies that have been going up to Superior Court back at Circuit Court. We're going to have a lot more arraignments. We're going to have additional hearings that will require additional officers. We'll require PC, probable cause hearings in felony cases. There's usually a time limit. We have to have those in so many days of when the defendant was arraigned. So now we're going to need more officers back in the circuit court level to testify during these hearings. More bail hearings. It's more of what we have, but at a little bit higher level of a charge.
So before I recognize somebody else, there's just one last question. So given what you just explained to me, given what I can see, given I see the caseloads, why did you only ask for a part-time person and not a full-time person?
Well, we certainly recognize the need is now. And we also know that we have a little bit of time before felonies first starts in January. So we thought if we can at least get through the first segue, we'd be back again next year asking for that full-time. Tracy's been, adamant, I need a full-time, I need help. I was trying by way of compromise with the budget to
You
have
should listen to her.
trying to, by way of compromise, but certainly, and I've spent a lot of time over there this past year as well, working with them on a number of issues and seeing all that they do, including training our police department. And there is a lot that goes there, and certainly you can ask the chief and his deputies and other leaders over there about the need for training. And we've got new officers there, and we're going to have more new officers coming in. And this prosecutor's office does a tremendous job, and there's a great need for the training. And so we started with a part-time, maybe due to my fiscal responsibility coming down from here. But there is certainly bringing an additional prosecutor on a full-time basis in the city prosecutor's office. There is absolutely no shortage of work for that person.
Councilor Fennison.
Thank you. You mentioned that with the change with felonies first, there's going to be additional caseload. Do you have any approximation of what that would be?
I don't. I did contact the AOC, the Administrative Office of Courts, to see if they could break down the numbers. All they can tell me were the number of felony filings in Merrimack Superior Court, but they don't break that down, whether it's Concord or Beau, Loudon, or Dunbarton. So we didn't have the numbers that would be coming to us. And then there are many ways to get a felony pending in Superior Court. You can do a direct indictment where there's not an arrest made, or you can do an arrest. We're worried about the arrest because then they come immediately to us.
What was the total number for Merrimack County?
1,771 for 2022.
We do have a printout of that to show that, and there's obviously a significant amount of that will come to Concord. For instance, when the county picked up the felonies, I believe they hired on additional attorneys just as a result of felonies first going from the municipality to the county.
Another follow-up, this is slightly different, but you mentioned how we provide the services for Beau, Dunbarton, and did you say Loudon?
Yeah.
Okay. What percentage of our caseload is associated with those three?
Not a huge percentage. And the way we've always talked about it in the past, I have to have certain venues manned by prosecutors. So if I'm in court for 50 Concord cases, 1, 2, 3, or 4 more Loudon, Dunbarton, or Beau cases is not going to break the bank. I'm there anyway. So they don't have huge caseloads.
And it's not, to more directly answer, I think that's a great answer, but also the report, the docket report, you can take a look at that report and see how many Concord cases are there on a weekly basis versus the Beau, Loudon, and Dunbarton cases, which are far, far less.
I mean, just from a quick review, it doesn't look like it makes up a lot. I am curious, though, if I can ask one more follow-up. How does the compensation work? I can see the revenue line we're getting from other agencies, and I assume that at least a portion of that is coming from the work we're doing for those other municipalities.
Absolutely.
How is that? I don't recall if I've seen it before, but how are we compensated?
It's a contractual compensation that we receive approximately I want to say close to 70,000 or
Near
more,
80, yeah.
80,000 now maybe, a year. And
Yeah, I mean-
that goes up every year, and we're anticipating, those towns enter into those contracts with us earlier in our budget year, and we're anticipating at least a 4% increase next year.
Well, it says questions. I just, I noticed that, so for the work that we do for Bow, Dunbar, and Loudon, we're only looking to increase our revenues by about $1,300. So how do we charge these other communities? Is it
It's
like-
a,
is
it's
it
a
straight
monthly,
up contract, or is it a?
yeah, it's a monthly payment that they make to the city.
When's the last time that changed?
It goes up a percentage each year. It hasn't gone up a lot it's gone up either, 2% a year approximately. But we're anticipating, like I said, looking at the employment wages and how those have all increased over, especially this past year. We're gonna see, I would say, a significant percentage increase next year for our towns.
Thank you, Your Honor. It just occurs to me that there's not a particular lot of revenue that's generated from these outside departments. Would there be any advantage to looking at that arrangement and possibly eliminating representing them and using our folks just for Concord cases?
So we could do that. I've looked at that, and the problem is it's a revenue source, so you'd lose the revenue that's associated with it. And as Tracy mentioned, the caseload, because we're there already, makes sense. It isn't, I looked at it from the standpoint of, if we shed those towns, could we eliminate a position? Now you gotta look at it budgetarily, and the answer is no. So you still have the cost, but you don't have the revenue. So it didn't make sense to, Attorney Kennedy's recommendation is what makes sense, is you're just gonna have to increase the cost. Now, if people aren't willing to pay that is decided at a town meeting for those communities. So they're gonna have to make that decision about whether they wanna do it, or they wanna bring it inside, and I'm sure, pay much more inside than what they would be paying us.
Thank you.
One last, go ahead.
This goes back to what the city solicitor was talking about. Have we negotiated yet for this coming year as far as what the towns are going to pay?
Yes,
Okay.
because their meetings are already gone by.
Okay.
Right.
So we have to do it in advance of town meeting. Yep.
So
Thank you.
we'd want to get in early to make sure they can bring it to their voters.
Thank you.
So last thing, we've talked about this in the past, and I just wanted to know if it's still the same, or if it's worse or better. But can you talk about your experience that we are seeing in the city with right-to-know requests?
It's up there. I mean, these requests are becoming more complex. They are, exceeding, at least citywide, more than 100 a year, which is, several a week. And some, occasionally I'll get one that says, oh, I got that document right here. But these requests take a lot of time and effort and legal analysis to get through the process of determining what is and what is not subject to disclosure. The concept, just employment matters alone. And so, as you know, and I think we've talked about this, is that the Supreme Court has done a 180-degree turn on determining what is and what is not subject to disclosure in the employment realm. And that goes to this privacy test that the Supreme Court now employs. So before, it was automatic, personnel-related, automatic, not disclosed. Now, for any type of personnel employment-related type of document that the city may possess, and it possesses a lot, we employ this privacy test. So it's a balancing test. So with each concept, we're balancing, trying to figure out whether or not we are going to disclose certain concept or documents in the city. And it's a constant, I'm doing that every day of the week. Every day of the right to know is along with all the other, cases, agreements. I don't think there's a day in my practice, and it's even affecting the criminal, because they'll discover discovery through the right to know request through the criminal bureau as well. So it is a huge part of our lives. It's growing. We're watching bills across the street and seeing what, if anything, we can do to get some relief. But we're working at it, and our city, the system that we have has been, I would say, efficient. but still nonetheless, you know, it's a tax on our.
Thank you. Counselor Chambliss.
Yeah, Jim, where are the requests coming from?
All over the place, literally all over the country at times as well. So we'll go get data searchers from Iowa, looking for checks or something from the finance department, and just newspapers or just anywhere, any type of person or citizen. These requests come in from all different types of organizations, planning and zoning type of organizations that are looking to do some type of work in the city. And, we're working with all different types of departments, whether it's the zoning, the code division, community development, planning, engineering. And I'm just going off the top of my head what I'm thinking what happened Friday or last week. I mean, it's all the time, it's everywhere.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Fennessy.
Thank you. Have you seen anybody using the Office of the Ombudsman yet?
Yes, Mr. Kerr over there, he's the ombudsman now for the state, and that is a new office that can hear right-to-know law disputes. I do understand that I think they've had 5 or 6 cases over there right now, and it's an alternative. So we talked about this in our right-to-know law training last week or so that I think some of you came to. But it's a new office, and to the extent that somebody believes that they have been not provided the documents or a governmental body is engaged in something outside the scope of the right to know law, they can bring it to the ombudsman office instead of or in lieu of going to the Superior Court. And then you get a decision from the ombudsman's office, and then from there you can appeal to the Superior Court that decision. However, you don't get a choice. If you go to the ombudsman, you can't go to the Superior Court as well. You only have an appeal there. So you have one shot of either going to the Superior Court or the ombudsman. But yes, Councilor Fennessy, it's an office that is starting to take off.
Anyone else? Great. Thank you very much, both. Appreciate it. Mr. Manager takes us to the assessing.
Okay, so the next page you'll want to be on is page 76. Revenues budget to budget are up $48,000 or 6.9%. The main increase is due to the Briar Hydro increase for $37,000, and this is the net of the amount that is transferred to the Merrimack Valley School District. The remaining increase are annual changes for other payments in lieu of taxes. Expenses budget to budget are up $34,000 or 4.4%. That's due to regular wage, benefit charges, and the reinstatement of $1,400 for training. Be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. I have a question about the professional development. It looks like it's gone up twofold since 2022. That and professional services, if you could just speak to that. those
Sure.
expenses.
The training, professional development is, we've had quite a turnover in staff, as you know. And in addition to that, much of the dollars that were previously in training budgets for many of the departments had been zeroed out during the last recession. So this is the second year that I've been trying to add back training dollars in limited fashion for the departments. And being that we're going to be undertaking some major work in assessing over the next couple of years, I thought this was advisable. The professional services line item, get to the assessing budget. And I can have John come up if you like from assessing.
While you're doing that, so which was the one you just asked about? Professional development?
Professional development?
Yeah, and professional services.
Professional services, that's what consulting services for tax, consulting, things like that.
Right.
22, we just didn't spend as much.
Oh, right. Thank you, Brian. So The professional services breakdown is consulting tax appeals, so we bring in consulting service. We had a major case to work with Jim Kennedy on for an appeals case. We bring in outside services. We also, there's about $5,000 for hosting the web-based statistic database. People can go in and look at the information. And then just the regular main contract, which goes up every year for the vision software, the assessing software. And that's pretty much it. The reason what you're looking at in terms of what was actual, we budget the dollars for assistance for the attorney's office, but if we don't spend them, then you see the actual number coming in lower. So the money that was budgeted is actually significantly higher than that. We just didn't spend it.
Okay.
So the money just needs to be available there in case,
Thank you.
essentially Jim Kennedy, an assessor, need the dollars.
Okay, thank you.
What else? Mr. Manager, could you talk about the goal for 2024, number 3, coordinate and cooperate with the New Hampshire Department of Revenue for scheduling and completing the required assessment review schedule for calendar year 2023? Is this something that DRA is requiring us to do? Is it something we should do?
Something we
Does
should
it
do.
have to be done in calendar year 2023?
It's something we should do, but if we don't do, then we'll have to do. So we'd like to do it on an approach where this is a good idea to do it, if the time has come to do it. We have a new assessor in the office who's ready to do it, and that's why there's also money recommended in the budget, to do this work coming up.
And if we don't do it?
Then you will likely very shortly be ordered by the state to do it.
Councilman Fennessy?
How long will it take to do that?
We're anticipating, if we can find the company and they have the ability to do it, meaning the staff, because assessors are very rare, or the appraisers are very rare. We figured it would take 2 years. One approach would be to, break up the city into 20 percentiles and go around the city, but then things get out of whack very quickly if you're doing it over a 4 or 5 year period. So the approach would be to do it over a 2 year period. And in essence, it would be seamless because the time you appropriated the dollars, went out and hired the company and got them going and did the work, it would just blend in. It would take a good 18, 24 months to do it anyway. So it makes sense to fund it over 2 years.
Councilman Brown?
Thank you. I was just looking at the 2024 goals, number 4. There's a review of exempt properties, 2 to 4 properties a year. They're only reviewing 2 to 4.
We do 2 or 4 every year if there's time to do them. So we take major exempt properties and make sure that they really still should be exempt.
That seems very low. How many exempt properties do we have? I think we have.
Hundreds and hundreds. But they've been doing them all along. It's very intense work. You can imagine if essentially you end up in court with all of these. Because if you go to somebody and say, hey, you haven't been paying taxes for 100 years, but it looks like you've changed your mission, and now you should be paying taxes for the rest of eternity, generally they put up a fight. And so you want to make sure you're in very good standing, do all the research, and move forward with that. And the department's done it. As you can see, if you look down at
Number 3.
2023 goal status number 3, the goal is to do 2 to 4. Doesn't prohibit them from doing more if they can do it.
Yeah.
So it really depends on the time available.
Anyone else?
Thanks, Your Honor. The digital tax map program, which, hello. I was just wondering if we could get an update on that, because it did mention May 2023, and just explain for the public what that information enhancement is.
I asked John to come up. Sue, you're welcome too, if you would like some camera time. So you know our assessor, John Rice, and our deputy assistant, deputy, Sue Golden.
The boss.
Digital tax mapping.
Yep. Can Can we just go back to the 2023 question, because that's the 5-year assessment review and not to confuse it with the update. So every 5 years, we have to have like the exemptions and the processes within the office reviewed, and that's what the number 3 is, as opposed to
Measure and list.
measure and list.
Exactly.
So it is a required review for the Department of Revenue. It's done on a rotating schedule with all municipalities. This is our 5th year, so every 5 years they do come in. They visit our office, they take a sampling of our exemptions and credits and any other paperwork they want to review, timber, excavation. They go through our files and just see how good a job we're doing and report back. So that's what that is. That is, they call it annual review, AR. That is different than the full measured list that was being discussed.
So number 3 is AR.
Yeah. Yes.
So where's the full-blown, I think what you were referring to, review or assessment of the properties? The situation Nashua got into.
Oh, that, where, you mean where is it? In terms of where?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, got it, never mind. Did you hear the question about the, Councilor Todd's question?
I didn't hear what the question was.
No, just that, for the digital tax map program, just an update, and then just for the public, just to let them know what the enhancements are gonna be to the information.
So the digital tax mapping has been completed, and the biggest thing that you can see is when you go online is that the measurements, to the best of companies, either through deeds or plans, have been updated along the, the property lines. They're not survey quality, so if somebody has a specific issue between boundaries, that's a separate issue, but it's been updated and people like it because they're able to see, within their lot where their house is in relation to the property lines.
Thank you. That was a 7-phase program, I remember.
Yeah,
With
and
6A and B, I think, wasn't there?
Yeah, it's been quite a while.
So we've been at this for 7 years, and you funded a portion of it to make it manageable from a tax perspective. So this was for last year.
Councilor Pierce? Councilor Pierce?
Thank you. With all this assessment language, when is the next eyes on the property assessment? Do we have one of those scheduled? Walk in the door
So
and...
that's what I asked about, and that's what the answer was, it's in the capital budget. So apparently when we get to the capital budget, we're gonna talk about
Okay,
If you fund it
right,
this year.
thank you.
that. Anybody else? Thank you both, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any last questions regarding assessing? Okay, human resources?
So in human resources, you want to be on page 79. So revenues budget to budget are flat. The expenses budget to budget are up $201,000 or 29.9%. In addition to the annual wage and benefit increases, budget also includes funding for a class and compensation study for $80,000, a referral bonus program for $24,000, paid family medical leave program for $78,000. This budget also continues to include funding for the Circa diversity postings for job openings. Be glad to answer any questions.
Who has questions? Anyone? Councilor Brown?
Sure. Again, the professional services, it's just a extremely large jump, and I know you mentioned CircaWorks, and is that included in the professional services?
Yes.
May I ask how much the CircaWorks costs?
You got it?
So in professional services, that 5,220?
There we go. 5,220. Mayor is right on top of
I've done this a few times.
Does that figure for professionals, thank you, Your Honor, does that figure for professional services also include the start of the compensation study?
Yes.
And that's probably why it's such a large number.
Big number, that's why
Thank
I
you.
listed those out.
Yeah.
It's also the paid family medic leave, is it not?
It is, and it's also the referral bonus. So all of those programs that we approved in January are included for the next fiscal year in that line.
So you approved them already for the rest of this fiscal year, now you have to fund them for a full year.
Any further questions?
Let's do it.
That's what tonight's about.
Is someone else? Okay, thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Takes us to finance.
Okay, so finance is starting on page 82. Revenues budget to budget are up $2.8 million, or 4.7%. The property tax revenue is the main driver here due to the increase in property tax revenue of $2 million. Motor vehicle registrations are up $100,000. Investment income is up $510,000. The use of fund balance is down $375,000. Rooms and meals tax is up $578,000 budget to budget, reflecting the increase in the state contribution to the same level as identified during the tax rate setting last fall. On page 83, there, expenses budget to budget are up $144,000 or 5.8% due to wage and benefit increases. Funding for the full other post-employment benefit actuarial evaluation report, which is done every other year, that's $9,000. The 5% increase on our Munis Enterprise Resource Planning service contract, which is $6,500, $19,000 for citywide print services contract, and there's been reductions in other departments, so it's now located here. In the first year of the Enterprise Resource Planning vendor self-service module contract for $3,200. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Councilor Champlin?
Thanks, Mr. Spell. This might be something for a question for Mr. LeBrun, but, and it's not a budget specific, but it's on the top of my mind. Question is, do we have a sense of what the immediate impact would be on the city should the federal debt limit not be raised, and with all the cascading impact of that?
Yeah, I mean, just immediately, I think it probably would have minimal impact on us, but I think as we go forward, if interest rates continue to rise because of that, certainly we would see a benefit on the interest revenue or the investment revenue, but we would probably also see an additional expense in our bond issuance. I haven't asked the question of our financial advisors, but if the federal government's bond rating is reduced, what does that do to the all of the other bond ratings for states and other municipal governments? That could have an impact because usually states and municipalities can't be rated higher than the federal government. So I think those are the types of things, and if that happens, then again, the interest rates could go up. So we could see that type of scenario.
Follow up, Your Honor? Thank you. And that's part of what I was thinking about. But also, are there any federal revenue streams that might suddenly stop that would cause financial distress for the city?
I mean, to the extent that we have any dollars that are coming through, most of the dollars that we have coming in come through the state to the city. So we may have some grants from like whether it's the police or fire. I'm thinking just off the top of my head, like a Department of Justice grant. And those aren't typically a lot of dollars, but those things may stop flowing. Anything else that's supported, we've received most of our payments for like ARPA funds and things like that, but there could be some things that we haven't received yet that could be slowed down if the state doesn't get their money, and then they defer us as far as not getting our money.
Do you think it would have any impact on our Loudon Road Bridge project? Or do we already have those funds in hand?
Well, we have that $1.9 million funds that we got as the additional contribution for highway block or bridge aid, right? So we have that, but the other 80% of that other $22 million, could be held at bay, depending on how long this type of project goes. Now, this year, it's really the design of the project, so, it's a smaller amount this year. I wouldn't anticipate that if there's a deadlock in between the Republicans and Democrats, that it would last for an extended period of time, but who knows? you know, that could happen, but, you know, typically it would be a relatively temporary type of situation. But, you know, there may be other circumstances that occur that we're not aware of right now, or just unanticipated consequences.
Thank you. I just recall the impact that the,
An amount of employees that we have, that's the COLA increases and merit increases that we have. We don't have any added staff in our finance department this year.
Yeah, that's simply reflective of the contract the council approved.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Following up on Councilor Chaplin's comments, the ARPA money, have we spent it all? Is there money we're expecting to get, or have we actually spent it?
So from the main ARPA contribution that we have from the state, remember that was from the cities, the main $4.5 million, that was booked as a revenue replacement funding stream to be used to offset wages and other operational costs for the city. So we've booked that as a revenue line, and we have the last revenue line coming in FY24 for $899,990, I believe is the number. So that is the last of it. We don't have any more coming in for that ARPA money. There has been a spattering of other ARPA funds that have come through in a number of different places. I think you've approved some dollars for the wastewater plant for, I believe it was the solar project there. 250,000 there. There were a few other items. I think the library got a few grants. I think the general services or water or wastewater received another fund. I can't remember how much it was off the top of my head. So we've gotten most of what we've received, what we needed to receive. I don't think that we received that 250,000 yet for the wastewater fund, but so we're awaiting still some dollars, but we've received the majority of it.
I'm asking because at the last New Hampshire Municipal Association meeting, they spoke about a bill that has passed Congress, and it's called the Stay Grow money. And basically, it's a 22% clawback of any ARPA money that hasn't been spent. So you can have it obligated, but that still would still be part of the clawback. You'd have to have something under contracts.
Yeah, and for us, for the main portion, that $4.5 million, you know, we would certainly be able to prove that we've spent those dollars through the course of fiscal year 23. In fiscal year 24, we haven't spent those dollars yet, so that could be, you know, at risk of being clawed back if that's what they're.
That does happen.
Yeah,
Thank
that type of approach is typical with the federal government. So when we put together how to spend these dollars, we anticipated that there's going to be this whole show at the end where the money never really gets to the places where it's supposed to go. So.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I think we're at IT.
So for information technology, you want to be on page 86. There are no revenue budgeted for fiscal year 24. Expenses budget to budget are up $15,000 or 1.1%. Wages and benefits are down slightly due to attrition and changing the systems and analyst position to a systems administrator position and attrition in the department overall. This budget also includes funding for password manager, patch management, and a centralized login software services, all for network security purposes. We want to make sure that they have the resources to do what they need to do. Professional development is down slightly, $3,200, due to a reduction in tuition expenses. Somebody finished the programs that they were taking, so the money wasn't necessarily the budget there. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions, IT? Costa.
Thank you, Your Honor. So 2024 goal, item 3, implement improved security protocols, excuse me, and network access. That's good. All in favor of that. I'm just also wondering what efforts, and I think we've probably asked this question with much experience, but what efforts are planned or are in place to help prevent hacking, and are we continuing ongoing training with city staff?
Yes. So I'll ask Jonathan to come. So our Information Technology Director, Jonathan Smollin's here to.
Sorry, I only heard half of that. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, it was just, I was just recognizing the 2024 goal, item 3, with the implementing improved security protocols and network access, which I said was a good thing. And then my question is, what other efforts are we doing to help prevent hacking? And then also the ongoing training of city staff to prevent hacking, and phishing and so forth.
Well, a lot of IT security is built on layers. Our main focus is to put as many layers between us and any potential hackers or data breaches as possible. That's a standard IT security approach. That training is an ongoing effort, especially with staff turnover, but it is something that we're always working on, obviously.
Thank you. Follow up here. With that continuation of as you're describing it, does that include, let's say, providing ongoing examples of attempts at phishing that you might send to city staff employees, and then, seeing how many people actually click, unfortunately, on the information, but it's safe because it's just a test. Are those the kind of things you're talking about? That
right. We haven't got anything in the current budget for that particular product that you're talking about. But you can expect to see that in upcoming years. We try and spread it out because we don't have enough staff to implement all of the security that we would like to all in one go. So we have to break it up, each year. But it is on our.
Just one more follow-up then to that. That's good. So in the interim, then, before we actually have some kind of a program like that could be on repetition, you do say that you are still working with city staff in terms of I don't know how often does it happen, but it happens at certain intervals, I guess, where you're providing information, just as by way of example. I'm only asking that because there are so many changes. So I know, for example, that companies that have employees that have personal phones are now they're actually now receiving fake text messages. Hey, how are you doing? Right. And then you reply to that, and you've got a breach. So the breaches and the hackers are continuing. So just in terms of asking the question about are keeping pace with that change in their abilities and their ideas and concepts.
Yeah. Currently, our approach is an ad hoc basis. So we have someone from the IT department working with somebody in one department at a time. We currently don't have a city-wide program that we run, but we do work with Premex, and they do have IT courses that any city staff can get free of charge. But it would require those departments to enroll their staff or have their staff take the initiative to enroll. We haven't required any at this point, but that is something we will be looking at in the future.
Do you want to talk about the three that are funded, the password manager, patch management, centralized login source?
Right, yes.
Why don't you explain what those are? With the
password manager product, it is one of the security techniques that we use is not to use the same password for every single website. If you do that approach, then if one site gets compromised, then they've compromised all sites. Obviously that, with the average number of passwords people have being, about 50, 60 passwords, that's too many to track. And that's where a password manager comes in handy, is it allows you to secure all those passwords in one central location that is harder for them to compromise. Patch management allows us to check all of the products that we have in the city network and check that it has been patched and notify us if there is any products that a patch has been released, but we haven't yet patched it, which reduces the length of time between a patch being released and the product actually being patched. The centralized logging system is with so many servers and firewalls and products on the inside, one of the techniques we use to identify a data breach is for unusual activity. When you have 50 products on the inside, all with their own logs, it makes it hard to log into every single one of those to identify any issues. So we use a centralized logging system to collate that information in one location so that when something happens, or if something happens, you can easily identify it and take action upon it. So it reduces the length of time between something happening and us being able to identify and take action.
So the reason those three are funded is because we have so many diverse programs on so many diverse departments that keeping track of all this and making sure in generally patches are security related, just like you see when you receive a patch for something. So to keep track of all of this and make sure it gets done in a timely fashion, that's why these were funded, because just there's so many programs, because you can imagine police is something very different than fire, is very different than wastewater and water. So there's that many to keep track of.
So Chief Hoskins not going to have to call Chief Thomas and ask him what his password is anymore?
Your Honors.
That's okay.
Counselor Todd brings up some really good points about the security of our systems and the diversified programs that we have. To me, these are all commonplace that all companies use these type of technologies, and that anybody working with technology nowadays, they're familiar with single sign-on, and the single sign-on is initially really just to protect access into the different softwares that you're allowed to, and it's all controlled through your office. The other bullet that's here is the two-factor authentication for first responders. That is HIPAA compliant, is that correct? And that's why they have a two-factor authentication?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This has all been great. As proof of the ongoing Pennacook-Concord mind meld, Councilor Todd asked the question that I was going to ask, so I'll ask this, and it's very pressing. I keep getting emails from a guy named Jim Boulay asking me to pick up gift cards for him. Should I pick up the gift card, or should I delete that email?
Just do it, and then it goes away, then you don't have to do it again.
Send it to the IT director.
He'll manage that.
You've got it.
That's not point.
Thanks. I think all these questions are great, and I don't believe to understand all the answers, and I spend quite a bit of time with IT, so I think maybe the best way to ask the question is how confident on a scale of 1 to 10 are you that our systems, our networks are protected from unintended access?
That is always a very loaded question. But I am confident that we are definitely well above average. We're in government. It's unlikely that we will be at the top level, but I am confident that we are definitely above average.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just have a couple of questions. I'm looking at page 87. You're talking about number 3, service indicators, average website visitors per month. It looked like there was a jump of almost 30,000 visitors between 21 and 22. I was just wondering what that was from.
I think her name is Stephanie.
Was there something new?
I'm not aware of what
COVID
caused
information.
that kind of a jump.
Okay. That's fine. I wasn't sure.
Stephanie.
I do have another question. During our, or after our May 9th training by the city solicitor, a Concord resident asked about the website being discernible to speakers of other languages or non-native English speakers. Do you have any plans to make the website translatable or somebody who could maybe read it in a different language?
So we currently do have an option, I believe, on the website that allows that to be translated into other languages, but it's not right on the front page. And with the current website, I don't believe there's any way of getting it more visible. That being said, I believe that a lot of people with other languages tends to use products from Google, like Google Translate, which works.
We can't put it on the front page with this system, but it is available.
Could you tell me where it is on the website?
Off the top of my head,
Stephanie will know.
Hi, so I apologize because I'm not looking directly at the homepage at the moment, but maybe if you have it, it's down near the bottom menu. There's, I believe, what looks like a gear wheel, and if you click on that, it gives you the translate option.
We can't put a, I'm sorry, may I ask a question?
You cannot.
It's a footer.
There's no banner that we could put up to, or a message that says click here for multilingual?
It seems like even if you don't have a click,
Hard to see-
you
it's hard to
message
see it on
further
iPad.
down to them.
Right there,
Yeah, right there. So it's basically under
the seal.
the seal on the homepage. But yeah, I did reach out to our current website company to ask about some other options. And their answer was that was what we have right now. But I do believe we might be going through a website redesign at some point soon. So that's definitely something
So if you
that's
click
on our
the-
list.
Click the gear, then translate page, it's right
Yep,
there.
yep, and I
That's
saw.
been there for quite some time.
Right, it looks like it just translates it into Spanish, doesn't look like there's options, but you said that there's something coming.
Okay. That's Jim.
Yeah, I would just, Stephanie, you probably already know this, but the Chamber just redid their website, and they have very prominent translation. So when we ever get to the point where we redo our website, you might want to, they might be able to provide some advice.
If you click where it says Spanish, there's probably about 120 or so languages there. So really, almost any language you need is right there. And it has been there for quite some time. Thank you.
Anyone else? That's missing.
Thank you. Sort of along the same lines, I know one of the big things is ADA compliance for visually impaired. Are we in compliance with sort of I forget what the standard is, but there's basically a standard ADA compliant thing that businesses utilize. Do we do that for our website?
I don't have an answer for you. I don't know if you.
Something we're required to do?
I think so.
Check and get
Find
back
out,
to us.
find out.
Get back to us. Thanks. Anyone else? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I think we're on city council.
So for city council, you want to be on page 89. Expenses budgeted budget are up at $2,800 or 6.9% due to funding for city council orientation priority setting session meeting for $2,500 and a small increase in advertising for $300.
Any questions on city council? Okay, let's jump to city clerk.
Next, you'll want to be on page 106.
Actually, I'm sorry, Your Honor, I did have a
Page.
question.
I'm sorry, I didn't see your hands. Questions regarding city council?
Yes, I'm just looking at page 103. I'm looking at the board commissions, and I know that there are different ad hoc committees, and there was one that was created for the Beaver Meadow Building Committee, and I know that there are different facilities that we're looking at coming up, future police station, fire station, library, and I'm wondering if there will be ad hoc committees as well for those facilities. And maybe tours of different police stations, you know, if that was a precedent that was set for, you know, examining and analyzing new facilities.
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe. Maybe. We'll see how it goes.
Okay, thank you.
On page 106, city clerk, Revenues budget to budget are up $2,900 or 3%, mainly due to an increase in licenses and sundry services. Expenses budget to budget are up $69,000 or 12%. This is the regular wage and benefits costs, staffing changes, and a temp wage increase due to the primaries. Also adding $2,500 to compensate election officials' time for training. Also note that rent is down $4,600 since we no longer budget for rent for Ward 3 polling. And postage is also down $4,700 due to reduced mailings for polling location changes this year. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Who has questions? Councilor Brown.
Thank you. I'm looking at page 107. The average number of ballots cast. In 2024, it's projected as almost 13,000, almost 700 less than 2021. Why is that? I'm just curious why it's.
Voter apathy? No, it's
5,000 less than, you know.
elections.
What's that?
Elections. How many elections are?
Okay, significantly less.
Right, because there's, the number is, it really depends on how many people, how many elections that you have, right? So in 2022, every other year, it changes around. During presidential elections, if there's a primary, there's always a lot bigger turnout versus, it really fluctuates dramatically. If you go back and look at previous years, it does the same thing on a regular basis.
Just staying on the same page, I noticed under 2024 goals, the first one says relocate Ward 1 and Ward 3 polling locations. Where is Ward 3 polling location moving to?
I believe the city clerk is looking at moving it towards Beaver Meadow School.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Nye.
Mr. Manager, on Appendix B, there was a PCI request for almost $72,000, presumably to fund the May-June 24 state primary election. It was not put in the budget. Are those monies needed, or do we just run that from staff, or is that money from the state?
Well, the state was looking at changing the timing of when it was going to occur. So being that you really can't pin that down, and being that you're going to do it regardless of whether or not we fund the budget or not, there's no sense, to me, there's no sense in raising people's taxes for that.
So presumably then would be in the next year's budget, because it's going to be held in typically September.
Right, and if it isn't, then you'll do it early and you'll pay the dollars then.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Your Honor. I don't have a question. I just want to make sure that residents are aware that for Ward 3 to be outdoors in a tent in November, casting their votes tends to get people to vote less, and also volunteers to volunteer less. With the temperatures the last time hovering in the 20s, outside was not a great experience, but that's why we're looking for a new location.
Anyone else? Okay. We're on general overhead.
So in general overhead, you want to be on page 108. Budgeted budget revenues are up $92,000 or 1.6%. This is due to an increase of $84,000 transfer in from the opioid reserve for the police social worker, which is a new position. $29,000 increase in transfer in from the Conservation Trust for conservation, and a decrease of $138,000 transfer in from impact fees, a decrease of $45,000 transfer in from grants and donations, that's ARPA funds, and other changes in overhead transfers from enterprise and special revenue funds. Next page, on page 109, expenses budget to budget are up $407,000 or 2.9%. There's a $118,000 increase in transfer out trust for paving reserve, $41,000 increase in transfer out for capital projects, $120,000 increase for debt service costs, $32,000 increase for retiree health costs, $80,000 increase for comp adjustment, $23,000 decrease to social service agencies, and page 111 and page 112 provide a brief description of those items in the general overhead department. And this completes the general government section of the budget. Be glad to answer any questions.
Who has questions? Councilor Brown.
Thank you. I'm looking at page 112, and looking at Community Action Program, Concord Area Transit, and the Coalition to End Homelessness. You reduced or opted to reduce those numbers from what was asked for. Is that because we're seeing, are things getting better? We don't need the additional funding? I'm just wondering why you chose.
Yeah, I didn't reduce the numbers, I level funded the numbers.
From what was asked?
And every year, all these groups ask for additional dollars.
Right.
Right, so that's, to me, that's not a reduction.
Okay. I was, as I know the Concord area, I'm sorry, may I continue? The Concord Area Transit was looking at an expansion line in $20,000. Could you explain why you did not want to fund that?
Sure. I believe that was the line that would go from Concord to Franklin and Laconia. So I asked, is Franklin and Laconia funding any portion of those? Because I can't imagine too many people from Concord going to Franklin and Laconia, no offense. It'd be the other way around, and the answer was no. There was no funding for those. And my understanding is that they've received funding from other sources to cover that cost. So I didn't want to raise taxpayers' funds to do that.
Let's jump in.
Thank you. Mr. Espel, on page 108, looking at the transfer, you know what? I am not going to ask that question, if that's all right. Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor.
Anyone else? Okay. That takes the public safety. You want to do a hearing now, or do you want it to the end?
What you've said is you do public
I don't know,
hearing.
you sure?
You do the public hearing at the end.
I know, but we got people waiting, so it might not be friendly.
Either.
I'm in a really friendly mood tonight.
It's early. We'll see.
You feeling okay?
I was given an option. Okay, so at this time, we'll open it up to a chance for everyone to testify on anything they heard within the general government budget. And as you know, that includes our city manager's office, legal, assessing, human resources, finance, IT, council, clerk, or general overhead. Who'd like to testify?
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, Finance Committee. I'm Jessica Martin. I'm the Executive Director of In Town Concord. We were one of your budget items today. I just want to thank you for your continued support of In Town Concord and our mission to amplify, celebrate connection around downtown Concord. I thought today I would come and present a couple things, one of which I would like to share some of our highlights from 2022, 2023. We had some of our largest events to date during last year's fiscal year. We were very proud of our rooftop tour that sold out, and we were also very proud to be able to fund a $10,000 facade grant to a downtown business, Barrett Holdings, of $10,000 at 65 North Main Street. So that's the Post and Parlor building for you, if you don't know. We're also really proud to have a member of the city staff now on our board. So Stephanie Breton joined our board this year. So we're really excited about that. We also facilitated Main Street America conference tour. We had the mayor, Matt Walsh, and Jenny Kredovic were part of that. So we're really excited to have that too, a tour of our downtown. So I just wanted to say thank you for your continued support. This year's Market Days is already sold out, so we're thrilled with that. We have a nationally known band coming again this year, so we're really expecting large crowds as we have with all of our events coming up. And with that, I'd just like to mention another issue that we have, that we feel very strongly about and we know is of importance to the Finance Committee and also the City Council, which is public safety. And while this is a finance committee meeting, we also, this is a finance issue as well as a public safety issue. As the organizer of large-scale events, ensuring the safety of our attendees is always at the forefront of our minds. With our events growing in size, we've become increasingly concerned about the security of these community gatherings. On more than one occasion, we've encountered incidents where vehicles have attempted to breach barricades at Midnight Merriment as also market days. We're recognizing the need for enhanced safety measures at these events. We were invited last year by the Concord Fire Department and General Services and the Concord Police Department to witness a demonstration of a modular vehicular barrier system developed by a company called Advanced Security Technologies. During this demonstration, we were thoroughly impressed with the system. I'm going to pass around some information too. You can each take one. Its user interface was friendly, the design was lightweight, and adaptability stood out as key advantages of the system. The ability to swiftly maneuver the barrier system would allow for emergency vehicles to pass through when needed at a large event. I'm providing you each with a handout today that serves as a follow-up to that demonstration. This resource offers detailed information about the system itself, the associated costs, and the numerous benefits it brings to the table. At this point, I'd like to introduce Allison McGregor. She's a resident of Concord who personally experienced the Waukesha parade attack in Wisconsin on November 21st, 2021. Her presence here today highlights the urgency and importance of implementing effective security measures to safeguard our community. Allison?
Again, thank you. Allison McGregor. I live on the south end here in town. Moved here from Wisconsin, so back in, this will be first time presenting on something like this in front of people, so we'll take a second. But, so back in 2021, my family went home for the Thanksgiving holiday, kind of our first post-pandemic gathering. My husband, who I know has been in front of you guys before, and our daughter, who was two years old at the time, went to Milwaukee. My family lives there. My mom and my sister and my nieces were extremely excited to take us to their local community holiday parade and kind of show my daughter kind of our local community. I don't know how many of you are aware of what kind of happened at that event, but we were having fun, witnessing, so much joy, so much excitement. My niece's friends and bands, we watched, dance troupes and all that kind of proceed in front of us, and it was getting close to the end of the parade where Santa Claus was going to be coming down, and we were hyping it all up for my daughter. And also we heard a scream, and we thought, oh, great, Santa's just about on his way. At that moment, within 25 feet up the sidewalk from us, we saw a red SUV go over the edge of the sidewalk, hit a number of pedestrians. We watched a woman be thrown onto the hood of the vehicle and drive back onto the parade route in front of us. Seeing that, we immediately were like, oh my gosh, what a tragic accident just occurred. This parade vehicle just came off the road and happened to hit someone. It took about a moment before we heard the car accelerate and continue down, full speed down the parade route. This was one of the first kind of hits that it took, and I'll spare you the details of kind of what we heard next. So at that point, I had the opportunity to flee with my daughter. I was pregnant with my second at the time. We had to push ourselves into a doorway trying to enter a store. We then proceeded to feel the pressure of the rest of the crowd pushing into us, where we feared we might be crushed in that situation. We had a shelter in place. We witnessed the power being shut off in the city and standing in a dark room with them for a number of hours, and then trying to navigate our way back to the car later that evening through the crime scene that was there. It was a traumatic event, to say the least. Even to this moment and to this day, if I hear a car accelerate down the road, it brings me back there, even after a lot of trauma training at this point. But the reason I want to come here is because like Midnight Merriment, Halloween Howl, these events are things that like brought us to this community that we find are so important and are truly like, again, are something that brought us here to live here, to start our family here. We just don't want to see something like this happen, and the system that they're showing is one that's recommended by Homeland Security, as well as what Waukesha at this point has purchased after the event that occurred there. So it just seems like, you know, an easy solution to a horrendous problem. The only thing the police had at that time to deploy against the vehicle were their handguns, which obviously is not a prime thing to be using in a crowd of people either. So to give them another tool that they'd be able to use and access that still allows for the fire and safety to be able to get into the facility as well, it's just something I really think would be important. And back in 2021, we actually landed back here right before Midnight Merriment, and that's when I reached out to In-Town Concord as well as our chief of police to request something, whether it was police vehicles blocking the road or anything else, you know, that is more than a wooden barricade. So I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you. So considering everything she just shared and our experiences with these issues, we've done some research. There are Homeland Security grants if this were not to get on the budget, which we understand it's a little late, but there are grants. The grants provide substantial funding opportunities for crucial endeavors, such as the purchase of the modular vehicle barrier system, with a total cost of around $240,000. This grant could potentially cover the entire cost, so that's one avenue to go. It's worth noting that Manchester Fire Department and Manchester Department Public of Works are currently in the process for applying for a similar grant for a barrier system for their own events. Given our status as the capital city, we must acknowledge that the potential threat level here may be even greater than Manchester. In conclusion, I strongly urge the City Council to endorse this endeavor by empowering the staff, the city staff and fire department to explore available Homeland Security grants, if not adding it to the budget. By doing this, we take a proactive approach to protect our community and support our readiness against potential threats, like Allison shared with us today. Thank you. Take any questions.
Thank you. So, Mayor Pro Tem Mark.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing with us. If we, to speed things up, and if we didn't go with the grant, how soon could you have this grant?
So Chief Chisholm, I believe, is here today. And yeah, he might have the answer to that question, but last time we spoke with the company that did this, they actually were very eager. They were potentially last year anticipating doing market days this year, but it never got legs. So I think that they could move it along. I don't know if it would be quick enough for market days, but I think probably by next year.
Follow up, Mr. Mayor. And this is mobile, like another community event somewhere else in the city could also
That's
use
the
this.
best part about it. It's lightweight. I was pregnant last year when they were doing the demonstration. I could move it easily. It locks in place. And it can move very quickly for a fire engine, which is always the issue with our events, is that they're right on Main Street. So if you block them with a big truck, you also have to pay a staff person from General Services to be around on call all the time so that they can move that big truck for the fire truck that has to come through for an emergency. So that's why these are ideal for our situation.
Thank you.
Councilor Champlin.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is to Ms. McGregor. I just wanted to say thank you for your email today, and thank you so much. I know that just from the way that you presented, this must be very difficult for you to talk about, and so I just appreciate you bringing this matter to the attention of In-Town. I appreciate In-Town bringing it to us. And again, I know that it was very difficult for you to relive that, and just thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Councilor Craven.
I actually was going to echo exactly what Councilor Champlin said. It's Mental Health Awareness Month. Post-traumatic stress disorder is not something to be taken lightly. Even telling that story, I know that that can be a trigger for you, and I hope that you will be well, that your family will be well, having told that story, and if you're not, please seek help.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Both of you, thank you very much for bringing this.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you for what you do for the city.
Thank you.
How's your daughter?
She's doing great.
Hey, that's right. Who else like to testify?
Good evening, mayors, members of the city council. City manager's gone. I'm Roy Schweiker, and I have two brief items and one item that may run longer depending on whether you want to hear it. First off, as part of the IT budget, I still haven't heard about how we're going to improve the Wi-Fi capability of the community center and the library such that people can actually use those 24/7 for streaming activities and so forth, and not just to maybe check email if the thing doesn't bump out. That seems to be a relatively inexpensive thing that somehow just keeps getting ignored. And the second thing is, better look this up, what you called it. Court-ordered payments. The budget for that seems to be going down, and I would like to encourage you to try and make that go up. Not to get a lot of money, but I think there's a lot of people in this city that feel there's no consequence of behaving badly. And so if you could get somebody for littering, and while they can't pay the fine, which is excessive anyway, but the court sticks them with $5 a month, then, you know, that would be a source of revenue, but also people would learn, look, you know, the city is serious about cracking down on bad behavior. I'm aware of a circumstance in Pennsylvania many decades ago where some vandals actually sawed down a fire tower. I mean, you think of vandals as being lazy bums, but I mean, here's a piece of steel that's half an inch thick. They took a hacksaw and sawed through 4 of them so the tower fell over. And when they were convicted, they were ordered to pay $5 a month in restitution toward this thing. And I don't know that the state ever got their money back. For one thing, people like this may not survive long. So one of the gentlemen died fairly soon thereafter. But the fire warden was pleased every month when that check came in that, yes, the people that did this are, you know, being punished for it. So I'd really like to see that court-ordered payments increased, if only to tell people, you know, we want bad behavior in the city to cease. And the last item, and the mayor can tell me if I'm out of order, has to do with the assessing department. And maybe this is part of the reappraisal and maybe it isn't, but I saw on page 75 of the budget, under core responsibilities, conduct ongoing property evaluation services in compliance with the New Hampshire Constitution and statutes governing assessments using internationally accepted mass appraisal practices. And I would like to submit that that is not presently done by the assessing department, and I think it should be done by the assessing department. It's in their core responsibilities. But I mean, as an example, I own a certain property. The property across the street is twice as large and has a paved driveway. When I have a mud driveway, and that property that's twice as large with a paved driveway is assessed to like a few $100s more than mine, less than 1%. And I asked one of the city assessors at the time about this, and they said, well, yes, a paved driveway is both an expense, so if you're doing a cost valuation, and it's also a desirable feature, so if you're doing a value evaluation, that should be included as part of the assessment. But the chief assessor in Concord at the time, who's no longer with us, refused to allow that. All property in Concord is not assessed for improvements, landscaping, paved driveways, anything. It's strictly based on acreage at a very minor sum. It's, you know, a couple of percent for a property that's twice as big. And that just isn't fair. We need to include in the assessments that, you know, anything that improves the value of the property, anything that adds to the cost of the property. If you're using any internationally accepted appraisal practices, one must think that should be in there, and it's not. And what effectively it's doing, of course, is meaning that people that have, you know, big lots with fancy landscaping are paying less tax than they should, and the people that have tiny lots with no landscaping are paying more tax than they should. So it's a good way to help the rich and soak the poor. And I think there's too much of that going on in Concord. We need to change that. So we need to add, you know, features both now and when we do the revaluation to include things that are supposed to be included. I mean, it's a guide to understanding a residential appraisal by the Appraisal Foundation, which is a congressionally authorized nonprofit. It says the appraiser considers the site's size, shape, topography, drainage, and any other attributes that may affect value. He or she views the site improvements, e.g. paving, fences and walls, landscaping, to determine their contribution to the value to the property. And we're just not doing that here. And a second example I'll give you was one you may remember from the last city council meeting. There was a developer that bought a property in January 2011 for $400,000. He somehow convinced the city assessor that this thing that he just paid $400,000 for was really only worth $286,000. And then he got the city to agree to freeze his taxes at $286,000 for 9 years. Then he didn't do the project he was supposed to. He sold it to another individual for $420,000. So that $400,000, he's now gone up to $420,000, but that person got the 9-year extension still based on $286,000, even though he just paid $420,000 for it. Now, as you may know, the reason we're considering this is that the gentleman wanted to sell it, and he did. And it sold for $650,000, which is more than double the assessed value. Now, if this was a residential property, the way it works in residential areas is if your neighbor fixes up his place and sells it, and somebody from San Francisco who isn't familiar with local values pays too much for it, they not only have their property value increased, but all the surrounding property values increased. If that's a residential area. So, to me, it sounds like, well, the downtown property is only valued at 50% of what it should be. We should not only increase that to $650, we should double all the assessments of the nearby properties downtown. Does anyone think that'll happen? Of course not. You'll probably give the guy 9 years at $286,000. But once again, this just isn't fair. It doesn't comply with the internationally accepted mass appraisal practices, and we need to get into this. And I've got more examples, but I'm sure you've heard enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody any questions? Councilor Brown.
Yes, I was just wondering, what is that property address that you just described?
Oh, that's the 10 Pleasant Street extension, the Monitor Statesman building.
Anyone else? So I'm going to have you turn around, look out the audience, and the gentleman out there is our new assessing director. He's going to wave at you.
I've already sent him a thing about this.
You can go out in the hallway, and he's going to chat with you. He's really looking forward to talking to you all about this stuff.
Okay.
So I'd encourage you to do that. All right. Good. Oh, Councilor Champ.
Am I correct in my memory that we removed the RSA 79E?
Yes.
Yes, so that is no longer frozen for 9 years. We did that at our last meeting, was it?
We held that hearing last in our monthly meeting. So I encourage you to go see the gentleman in the back.
And I'd like to respond to that. I didn't say it was still in effect, because I know it isn't. I'm merely saying that when you gave the second guy the same 9-year extension, you used the old value and not what he just paid for it. And if I was the guy that just bought it for $650, I'd be right in here asking for that 9 years at $286,000.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. Good to see you as always. Who else would like to testify in this area? Any one of the things we heard? Anyone? Okay. We'll close that public hearing, and Mr. Manager will talk about public safety.
Should we close the door?
I want to hear the screaming. Get your stuff.
It's all airing out now, but I had to take, there was water underneath. Year round. It was dark. It's rigid. The water had gone down under it. So, yeah. There's layers at the bottom edge of it, so about a 12 area. I put, that's a picture. I should be able to fall down. I'm just drying it out. I'm gonna spray it with bleach.
So before we go to public safety, to answer question regarding accessibility, there's a site, a webpage on our city site regarding accessibility design guidelines. Under Section 508, federal requirements. So all the website accessibility is there. It's explained on the city website. Police Department, you'll want to be on page 115. Budget, revenues budget to budget are flat, as you can see, and on page, that would be page 115. If you go to page 116, expenses budget to budget are up $503,000 or 3.3%. These are due to wages and benefits, so of that $503,000, $447,000, including essentially the new contracts that you approved, and the position of the police social worker position for $84,000 is included there. Under professional services, you can see that's up $19,000. That's really two major pieces there. The Leads Online piece has been approved for recommended for approval at $7,900, and a request for $1,500 in state accreditation. There's also $10,800 for a Power Engage system, $13,000 for increase in uniform costs, $7,500 for additional ammunition because of the number of new recruits that we have, and then other uniform costs related to additions, $6,500. Electricity is up $15,000. Liability insurance is up $10,000. And I want to reiterate again, this budget puts additional emphasis on public safety, supports resources, especially working for the city's most vulnerable population, and continued support for non-lethal options when dealing with offenders. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Spell, could we hear a little bit more about the plans for the police social worker? Sounds like a very positive step. I'm just curious about how that position would interact with the rest of the department and with the public.
Sure, let me ask the chief of police and his staff to come forward.
Excuse me, Your Honor. Can I add a question to that that can be answered at the same time? Which is, what is the difference between the Concord Police Outreach social worker and the police social worker? The difference between the two.
Same thing. Same thing.
Well, clarification, one's funded at 44,000, I'm sorry, one was not funded at 44, and the other is 84.
I could be wrong, I guess.
One is a lesser position, is a support position. The chief can explain the two positions and how they would work together, and our thinking on the timing for those.
Yeah, thank you. So the police social worker position is an upcoming model. It's in New Hampshire already. The city of Dover uses this model. We've interviewed the police and as well as the social worker. So ideally, we'd like to model our program based on Dover's success so far. And what's funded in the budget is a master's level social worker to really organize and kickstart the program, really to network with all of the stakeholders, whether or not it be mental health, substance use, homeless, et cetera, throughout. So when officers are interacting with individuals or families that need services, they'll just report right to our social worker, who will then navigate the system for them. The social worker would work with the fire department, the library, human services, across any city department. The second one, which we had put in to be funded probably for about 4 months of the budget, is a bachelor's level outreach worker that would work in conjunction with the master's level. We're hopeful that the program will be successful, so this time next year, we will be seeking fully funding that position. Having a master's level social worker also enables that master's level candidate to actually take on internships as well. So we'll probably be able to get some additional hours of work for free, if you will, throughout the year as well.
Did that answer your question, Councilman?
It does. Could I have a follow-up? Thank you. How do you see this moving forward in the future? Obviously, you just talked about possibly expanding the office, and what I'm asking is, how does this make our system better, and how does it possibly relieve part of the burden on our current officers, our line officers?
I think that it makes the system better because we're seeing gaps, right? Our staff are not able to follow up with individuals. They're just going from call to call to call. So if we have a good communication and a good internal protocols, the social worker position will be able to see and interact with the officers and interact with other city departments to find out individuals and families that are high utilizers of services. So if we can close those gaps, and also having a social worker that is embedded with their peers in different nonprofit organizations across the city will certainly be a benefit. We will expand it to do more outreach work, so it's more proactive than reactive. But I think the idea to start is to actually make sure you don't start out too fast and overburden the individual, but let them develop the program.
Right. Follow up? Yep. Thanks. So basically, if I'm hearing you right, what I'm hearing you say is that this should, or this potentially position could reduce, all I can think of is recidivism, but that's not the right term, but basically it might reduce repeat calls to certain family groups or to certain areas, things like that. Is that what?
Right, and that's that relationship building. And one of the examples that the social worker from Dover, one of the officers had mentioned or had noticed a homeless individual that was living in their car, and they reported this to the social worker. Well, the social worker worked to get that person housing or shelter. So these are the things that the officers are not going to be able to handle daily, but hopefully the social worker can navigate the system better.
And one final question. Sorry about this. Every time you give me an answer, you make something else occur to me. So basically, this position would be dedicated to this job, and shortages in the department would not, like for example in the POP unit, would not then require pulling back in this area because this person would be dedicated to that.
Right, this person is not a police officer, is just a master's level graduate.
I didn't get that.
Thank you.
Could you try again?
I got it.
Yeah, I understood.
Is that a follow-up? Yes, Councilor. That's great.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have a couple of items. Mr. City Manager, first on the revenue side, the special duty services for $250,000, just for clarification, that has nothing to do with, it's an in and out. We get money in, it pays for the special services for like construction patrol, event patrols, things like that, and that there's no added expense on the other side for retirement benefits or taxes. It's simply all in and all out, correct?
There is, it does cover all the expenses, and is there actually a small margin of benefit to the overall revenue. So
small.
Very small, but it covers all costs.
And follow up on this one, actually, Chief, is we've had many conversations with regards to burnout and overtime for our police department. And I also saw in the Appendix B that you had requested a police dispatcher that was not fulfilled. Does it have any correlation with the time that it took to hire the recent police dispatcher?
So, yeah, whenever we have vacancies, I mean, we're running at just at a bare bones schedule plan. So if we have a vacancy, that's 40 hours a week of overtime we're paying, plus, sick and vacation time. And we use we have two temporary positions, but they have full-time jobs, so their availability is scarce. And so oftentimes we're backfilling those shifts with either on overtime with dispatchers or with police officers on overtime. So the cost is getting out of control just to staff one vacancy. And we've had a hard time retaining that one vacancy for the past several years, so.
Thank you.
Is that-
I am all
Councilor
set, sir.
Sockens? Councilor Sockens?
Thank you. I also had a question about the social worker position. Will this be a little bit like the ACERTS program in that they'll also, go after a call and basically follow up with the families and identify the services that they need?
Right, so our ACERT program, ACERT is Adverse Childhood Experiences RT Response Team. That program currently does have a master's level or a social worker on the program or on the team. So this person could either fill in for that role or be a part-time to do that as well.
Councilor Knight?
Thank you, Your Honor. Chief, relative to the police dispatcher, projected amount of $70,577, is that borne entirely by the city, or do we split that dispatcher cost with the surrounding communities?
We do not dispatch for other communities. It's solely a Concord. Fire department is more of a mutual aid compact, but we're just strictly Concord.
Thank you.
Councilor Fennessy?
Thank you. Chief, I know it's probably 2 or 3 years ago, around budget time, we were talking about how it was so difficult to keep officers. It seemed like we were starting to make some improvements, and now it seems like we're falling behind again in filling vacancies. What's the department doing to try and attract and retain candidates?
We're doing everything that we possibly can think of. We're making good progress. I mean, even if you have an open application system and you see an application one every 5 days, that sometimes and you immediately are disqualifying people. We've had, 1,100 hits on this open application. We have 51 applications. As far as staffing is concerned, it is so fluid. Currently, we have 90 police officers on the books. Currently, I have 6 officers that are either on light duty or administrative duty. They're on payroll. They cannot leave the building because of injury. Most of the injuries occurred off-duty. I have 13 police officers that are actually in training. They're on payroll. 2 are actually training on the street. One just started with us today, a certified officer from another town. She will be heading out into training in about 2 weeks. We have 3 at the police academy that graduate mid-June. We are actually starting 7 additional police officers on June 4th. We have 2 additional interviews next week, so we may actually have a full baseball team starting on June 4th. And we're also recruiting candidates that we've identified for the fall and beyond that are not available right now, either due to school or other commitments. So we have at least 2 or 3 that are looking very good in the future. As far as advertising and recruiting, there is money in here to assist us, because when we go to job fairs, our product, right, is really, it's not up to date. It's not 2023. We're still stuck in the 1990s about our products. And so a lot of the monies that the city manager has given us over the years, and including this year, is going to really bring us up into a more reputable presentation.
Thank you. That was great. We've got this proposal in here for a new social worker. I'm interested, given the challenges we've had in trying to attract and retain police officers, what do we expect the market to be like for a social worker working for the department?
Well, I asked that very question to the Dover police social worker, and she told me that the market would be extremely high. Social master's level clinicians or social workers would seek this work favorably.
Councilor Todd.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I actually, Councilor Fennessy asked part of my question, which was where do we stand with our fall fee? I think you summed that up, but with the social worker position, do we anticipate that that will free up officers' time as well? That there might be certain instances where the social worker will be able to handle certain incidents without an accompanying officer, or will an officer still be required to work directly with the social worker?
Right, so it should free up in a number of cases as soon as that relationship is established with that family or that individual. Instead of them calling dispatch to see a police officer, they'll just call and speak to the social worker. There will be occasions where the social worker may want to go into the field and meet with somebody, and we would actually have to accompany the social work there for safety reasons. So, you know, that's a possibility. So that would increase the need of a police officer, but certainly something we're willing to do and make it happen.
Thank you. So Chief, I'm going to piggyback on some of what Councilor Fennessy said. We were talking a few years ago about, you know, recruiting and retaining. One of the concepts that was being spoken about was the quality of the people that you're actually getting or finding in your interviews. Are you seeing any increases, or you know, at the time back then it seemed like there was a struggle to find the right candidates?
So the applications have dropped off significantly since probably almost 9 or 10 years. We've seen the candidate, we have never reduced our standard, our quality of what we're looking for. But a lot of the candidates that we're getting, that we're hiring, they're top quality people. So, I mean, the numbers aren't there, but we're getting some really quality people.
Thank you. Chief, what's the status of the SRO at Runlet?
My understanding from the superintendent that the school board did not fund that in this year's school budget.
Thank you.
Thank you, Honor. Chief, I appreciate your staffing challenges. Begs the question, are there situations, and this excludes outside details, but are there situations where you're forced to bring in outside agencies to fill actual patrol slots?
Yeah, you know, what we talk about, sometimes we have 8 police officers minimum during the day. There have been days we've only able to staff 4. So the sheriff has, you know, had a sheriff in town. It's very easy for us to access the state police as well. So, you know, especially Monday through Friday during the day, we still have a full complement of officers that are assigned to detectives. So we're able to get internal resources and external resources during the day, but it is a struggle.
Just to follow up, Your Honor. And just to follow up on that, and I'll ask it delicately, but understanding that not all agencies are created equally, do you select different agencies to invite in to supplement us and exclude other? And I'm not asking you to name names, but I mean, are you selective about who you invite into the city?
Well, the sheriff has jurisdiction. The sheriff's office is always in town. We have mutual aid with all of our contiguous towns. So if we're in the Pennacook area and we need assistance, or the Bosquen police need assistance, that's mutual. Same with the Bowline, same with Hopkinton.
Yeah, I guess what I was getting at is not mutual aid necessarily, but you've got a slot, you can't fill it. You physically call another department and say, hey, we need a police officer for an 8-hour shift. Could you fill that for us? I mean, does that ever happen?
We would not take an officer and say, from Bow, for example, and say, we want them to cover, you know, Sector 4 on the Heights today, and that's not going to happen.
Okay, this was getting it. Thank you.
Anyone else? So I just had one question. So, so the social worker, you do not see them going into the field working with folks? So an officer goes to a call, respond to the call, they find that it's a person who just simply needs services.
Someone's going through a mental health episode.
It could be any kind of service. So you don't envision that social worker then meeting with that individual you're saying that a police officer would have to accompany that individual, that social worker?
So
That's what you said, right?
that's part 3 of my program, is to actually, to go and get a clinician that augments the statewide mobile crisis, so that we'll actually have our own mobile crisis clinician that would respond to active calls with the police. That's part 3 of the program. Right now, we do have mobile crisis for those particular cases where we need a clinician on scene. Certainly, this particular position would be follow up on that. But this position may.
Then help me understand follow-up. So follow-up doesn't mean actually going to, they're just sitting behind a desk? Is that what you're doing?
Well, if there's a crisis situation, this person probably would not be one of the first responders. It depends on what background the clinician has. This position in our model is more of that networking, provides services to individuals and families, but they will meet face-to-face with people, but not necessarily during a crisis.
So just to play devil's advocate, because it sounds a good idea, but why wouldn't you work with our human services to do something like that? In other words, why wouldn't you be advocating for human services to have more personnel? And then, because they're the ones who know the network,
Right.
they know where the services are, they know where the
So-
network is.
so this
why not?
person-
Why would you need somebody internally? Why would you work with another department?
So this person would be the point of contact with human services, with the library, with the fire department, any city agency. They will network with all of the stakeholders, whether or not it's Riverbend, the coalition, any of the recovery centers. And that's where they're going to try to navigate and follow up with people to ensure that they're trying to get the help that they need.
You're going to see when we get to welfare that we're asking for additional support for welfare because the demand is rising dramatically.
I guess picking up on what the mayor said, Chief, how would one of these individuals come into contact with a social worker? Would it be referral from the responding officer? Hey, here's a phone number, call the social worker. What's that engagement process look like?
Yes, it's an individual referral from an officer. It is the social worker reviewing the logs every day to identify people in need that may not have come direct. It's just collaborating with human services, collaborating with the fire department, the library, getting eventually with the outreach worker, as well as some of the interns to do some of that outreach work at the kitchen. Again, the library, the homeless community, and things like that.
And an in-house resource to all the officers who are there. I mean, they're going to have someone they can go directly to talk to and get master's level advice on and recommendations on how to handle situations. And I could envision training over time. So,
thank you.
But you don't envision them leaving the office?
No, they'll leave the office. But what I'm saying is
send a police
they're.
officer with them then? Is that what you said?
In some cases, yes. So sometimes it may not be safe to go to certain places, right? And for that person's level of comfort, yes, they may be accompanied. But there probably will not be responding as a co-responder model at this point in time. That's part 3 of the program. We haven't even started part 1 yet.
So what's part 2?
Part 2 is more of the outreach work. With that lower level, bachelor's level.
So only speaking for myself. I mean, you want me to commit to make this investment. And I understand you're using opioid money and they're not general fund money at this point in time. But we know that eventually it'll be general fund money and such. So the decision we make today is ultimately going to affect the general fund. So if from my perspective, and I'm the same guy who's added officers over the years, encouraged the council, we've done a lot of different things that you've asked us to do, but I'm trying to understand, because for me, the perspective is that I want to relieve pressure on that officer who's out in the field. As I sit from my office and I watch the person having the overdose, and I watch 2 police officers have to respond and do the Narcan and stuff like that, that person's in crisis. So after the police do their job, who then is the person who follows up? And I thought it was gonna be a social worker, and you're telling me, no, not at
Yeah,
all.
it will be the social worker.
You're saying, no, this person's gonna be behind the desk, and maybe they're gonna review a file that comes through, and they're gonna say, but so, how does that help the officer do their job?
So if a person succumbs to an overdose, is revived, certainly the social worker, this particular one we're talking about, will follow up with that patient. They will not respond to the actual overdose themselves.
Understand.
But they'll have that information, they will follow up. If the social worker wants to do a in-home visit and would like us to accompany them, we will do that. If they don't, then we will know where the social worker is all the time, they will have a radio. But those are the things that will happen.
Anyone else? Councilor Fezzi.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. What are they doing in Dover right now? Does that social worker go out at all to respond? Is it all follow-up? Does that social worker respond or follow up in-home without an officer? I'm just curious.
My understanding is that they do follow up. They do a lot of, they have appointments that people come and visit her at the Dover Police Department. Sometimes they meet at a neutral facility, such as a Dunkin' Donuts. And what they're doing is they're ramping up their outreach efforts. That's part 2 of their program. So they're in the process, this was a couple of months ago, but they were in the process of getting that part 2 started.
Anyone else? Did you have a question?
I'll wait,
Very helpful, appreciate all the information. Could I ask one, I can fill out a yellow sheet if you want, but I'll just tell you what it is. Could you get us the job description for the person in Dover? Yes.
We'll just email it out to everybody.
Yeah, just to get a better idea of kind of the, since we're modeling it after, you might understand correctly that we're modeling after Dover. So, okay, takes us to fire.
Okay. For the fire department, that's next agenda item number 6. So you were just on 5. You want to be on page 123. This item. Revenues budget to budget are up $272,000 or 8.4%, mainly due to increase in ambulance charges, which is $252,000, another $272,000, and also an increase in alarm box revenue, $18,000. Expenses budget to budget are up $174,000 or 1%, and that's on page 124. The increase is smaller than expected due to the collective bargaining agreement expiring on June 30. And without a successor agreement in place, the wage portion is not included as part of the fire department budget. Additionally, retirement expenses are down by $221,000 due to a reduction in New Hampshire retirement system rates. I'm adding funding for replacement of washers and dryers for the stations at $11,000. Replacement of a fire burn Connex box at $12,000. Funding to backfill training coverage at $26,000. Paramedic education tuition at $22,000. Headquarters concrete stairs replacement at $8,000. And overtime for self-contained breathing apparatus technical services which need repairs at $15,000. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Let's questions on the fire department budget. Council.
Mr. City Manager, the professional development section, is that, who does that affect within the police department?
Within the department,
I mean, the fire department,
understood.
sorry.
Within the department, all employees.
All employees, so there's a certain amount done, and is that done on the job, or is that outside of the work? Sorry, I should have asked for follow-ups.
It's done as part of their hours.
As
But
part-
I mean, generally what happens to do a lot of professional development, you have to do it on overtime or outside your regular hours, because you just get pulled away so often.
for calls and services.
So is there any dedicated time to do professionals, or are they just trying to do it on the job as much as they can, or?
No, there's both.
They both.
There's both.
Thank you.
That's why this is really, I mean, it seems like a lot of money, but it really doesn't go that far.
That's Todd.
Thank you, Your Honor. Probably a question for staff, but the 2023 goals, item 3 is the new fire training grounds. It's also 2024 goal, item 4. So the question is, does the fire department anticipate providing enough staff time to achieve the goal? I know it's been an ongoing issue.
Well, they do have a new fire training facility grounds. And the idea was to expand it over time. We've been looking at doing it through grants, but I'm sure, John, the chief can go into more detail on that.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Spell, on Appendix B, I see that the department requested a little over $99,000 for professional development training. This kind of relates to what Councilor Mattson asked. I was wondering why that was a priority for the chief. I noticed that it was one of his priorities back in August when he reported to the Safety Committee. And I'm wondering if he might be able to kind of explain how this differs from what we already do and why it's a priority, why it was a priority for him.
Sure. Can I ask him, I mean, if you look at the professional development line, you can see it's more than doubled in 2 years. It's a tremendous increase. So, but I'm sure I'd be glad to expound upon it.
Else?
Chief Chisholm's coming forward to talk about professional development. Anything else you'd like?
Good evening, Your Honor, members of the council. I was unable to hear the question fully back there.
What I was asking, thank you, Chief, thanks for coming up. What I was asking was, why was this a priority? First of all, how does your request, which did not make it into the budget, how does that differ from the professional development training that already exists? And why was this a priority for you when you reported to the Public Safety Committee?
Sure. So I understand the question is you're asking PCR number 89, the $99,000.
Correct. That's correct.
That was used, or that would have been used to support off-duty training. Only a certain member, our officers, have money that we can send them and pay for them to take off-duty classes. The PCR that did make it in, which was whichever it was, we requested a certain amount. It was
number 89?
48.
Oh, 48.
The quarterly backfill training. What happened is, over time, we used to send people to our training grounds to do live fires, and because the training that we do this is not a single company operation. This is a orchestrated operation between multiple companies. Generally, what we would do is we would backfill, meaning hire in additional people, so we can get people to the training grounds so they're uninterrupted. It's my understanding that over the years, because we've had such an increase in the amount of calls, we were unable to keep people in service to do the required EMS training, so the fire training fell off. So I was trying to get that fire training back in, which is very important because of the pool of people that we are getting. Our new recruits do not have the experience as we've seen in years before, where we would get 5-7 year veterans of the service. So the backfill training is specifically to get companies to the training grounds, at least a couple uninterrupted, so they can work on orchestrating those. The others is we have certain skills, technical rescue skills. There are other skills within the department that people, we do have some other professional development money to pay for the tuition. However, unlike the police department generally, unless they're on duty and we cover them, we basically pay someone to come in and cover them. They're not paid to go to their training, which is a model that I would like to get away from. And this is a big recruitment and retention that we're seeing we're seeing other departments within the state start advertising. We will start paying for this training. A lot already do this. So one of the things that my intention was that was such a big focus on training is we know, we just heard about the police department and the fire department is equally, maybe not equally right now, but it is a very grim retention pool or recruitment pool out there just because of the numbers. So right now, what we've seen with the newer firefighters, some of the newer generations, is training to them is engagement. Engagement is the retention that we were looking for and that we need. And we've already lost people, either come to us and go back to their old jobs. So it's part of our overall plan for retention.
Follow up, Your Honor? Thank you. You kind of anticipated my next question, which was the recruitment and retention issue. Would it be structurally possible to take a partial bite at the apple on this?
As far as that for the off-duty training, oh, absolutely. That was budgeted for 24 hours for each member that does not already have access to that. There is, any percentage of that would certainly help.
Thank you. Yeah, follow up, Your Honor. While you're here, could I ask you to comment on two other PCRs that were on Appendix B? 60, the peak load dispatcher, which also I think was one of your priorities, and also the fire inspector item 64.
Yep. So we'll start with the peak load dispatcher. That is for, to understand what that is, that was for a one full-time equivalent, not one per battalion, but one. Our dispatch center is currently dispatching for 24 communities plus an additional couple of services. Just like we've seen Concord, I know everybody here is familiar with the rate of increase in the calls that the Concord Fire is seeing, but all the other communities are seeing increases as well. So our dispatch center is very busy, I would say, to the point where we're overloaded right now. So the point was to try to bring somebody else in to get some additional help when we can show that throughout the compact, that's where the majority of the calls happen, but not only the majority of the emergencies, but we also have businesses, people taking boxes offline, the fire alarm boxes offline, and just other general business. And we would also use that as succession planning as well, to have one of the people be able to train with the communications captain to be able to start learning. We've seen a lot of turnover within the communications center, and we need to start building up that knowledge within the center.
And the fire inspector. Thank you.
Yep. And the fire inspector as well. The fire inspector, right now, we currently have two full-time equivalents in the fire inspector's office. We have the fire marshal and the assistant fire marshal. I am consistently seeing anywhere from 8 to 12, 14 hours a week in overtime with them just trying to keep up with the workload currently. They are operating right now, they're redlining right now, I believe. I asked the fire marshal to take a look at some of the other communities, the surrounding communities. Nashua has a pool of 5, Manchester 6, Portsmouth has 3, Hudson has 5. We have 2. Just to give you, right now we've really reduced the amount of public education and community outreach because we are focusing right now on inspections. Generally, the standard, this is not a law, but this is kind of a professional standard, is certain inspections we're supposed to try to be doing twice a year. We're hitting once a year. All of the the critical ones that are required by law, we are hitting right now. But, as we see the community start growing, the plans reviews are taking a lot more. They're more complex plans reviews, like the new the hangar going to the airport. That one took a significant time because this was a kind of a one-off, something we've never seen before within the department. And there was a lot of idiosyncrasies and some special circumstances with that property. That took a lot of time. And then we have some other fairly big plans within the community. So right now, I'm just trying to make sure that we are able to keep everything moving forward so we don't start seeing a slowdown in plans reviews and a lack of inspections.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Your Honor.
Council McNamara.
Thank you, Chief. So with bringing in more inspections, does that bring in more financial gain to the city at all?
So some of the, I would have to look into if those second inspections are also billed for. There is a potential chance for that.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With the peak lead dispatcher, is that cost all on Concord, or does the mutual aid compact, the other communities contribute? So
Yes.
would that 88,000, is that all Concord, or would that?
Thank you for that question. No, that is not all Concord. It would be all Concord for the first year because the way it works is Concord pays the entire wages and benefits for this year, but the next year we get 66% of that back. So the actual cost over time to Concord is 33%. But it would be the full 88,000 until we invoice and get it back next year. So we get paid in arrears on those.
So you would get reimbursed?
66% of that.
So for this year, you'd show as an expense, next year it'd be an expense and you'd have an offsetting partially offsetting revenue.
And going forward?
Right, every year going forward.
That's Todd. Todd.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I think I got my question answered about the fire department training grounds, and it's about training, as Councilor Champlin had asked generally too. So I understand the issues there. I actually just wanted to make a quick comment, if I could, about the hazard mitigation plan.
Sure.
Because I know that thank you, first of all, to the department and to Central New Hampshire Regional Planning Commission and all the volunteers that worked on that, because I know that there were significant number. How many volunteers were on that committee, actually? Do you know offhand?
I would, with just a blind guess, at least 12 to 15 that popped into various meetings.
Yeah, and there were a lot of meetings.
There was 18 to 22 plus hour meetings.
Right.
Plus work in between. Yep.
Yeah, so I just really wanted to recognize all the people that were involved with that and thank them for all of their time and commitment to this. It's a very important plan, and hopefully despite the revisions that we read about, hopefully it will be finalized soon. I guess that's the anticipation.
I'm hoping so. As you're referring to, FEMA has changed the standard that needs to be used. So Central New Hampshire Regional Planning is making those changes, and we're just waiting to hear back on those.
Thank you.
Who else? Did I miss anyone? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Do public safety? Can you slide your stuff, perhaps? So this time we'll open the public hearing on public safety. Anybody wishes to testify on either the police or the fire department proposed budget? Don't pack up too much. Anybody? Oh, sorry, there you go. Good evening and welcome.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Fiston Dashmir. First of all, I would like to appreciate you all for the work that you do. I think I need to get this closer. So it's pretty hard. I just noticed. I would like to support Chief's idea of having a social worker, and that is only if the individual is going to be working with minority groups, reaching out to get to know their issues and helping them to connect with our police. I think it's very important to have that individual in place. So that's all. If you all have any questions, I'd like to take in.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Well, we do have a question, apparently.
Just a quick one.
7:42, we have a question.
Huh?
Go ahead.
Well, I didn't ask any questions the first night, so, or any. Could you just expand on why you think that's a good idea? Why you think the police social worker is a good idea? How do you see that position interacting in positive ways, I assume, with the community?
Well, he mentioned a lot of things connecting with fire and other departments. I think for me, it would be more about, connecting with minority groups, New Americans, refugees. I think these people, they're people like others, but, there's a need of education about the system. Having someone that would be able to connect with them, get to learn about their issues and bring those issues to the police. I think our public safety, police has, they lack that. They don't have that in place where they have time or, advantage to learn about the needs for these individuals, these people, or these communities. I think having that social worker in place, it would mean a lot to those people, where we take advantage on, connecting with the police through that social worker and get our problems solved. Yeah, if that kind of answers your question.
Super, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Thank you, appreciate you staying tonight. Thank you. See you as always. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public hearing, and we're on to general services.
Members of the council, you want to be on agenda item number 7, general services. Would it be on page 128? Revenues budget to budget are up $52,000 or 5.4%, and the increase is attributable to transfers from other funds. On page 129, expenses budget to budget are up $690,000 or 6.5%. This budget supports funds for increased wages and benefits. As you know, the contracts that were approved, that's $351,000. Fleet CDL, commercial driver license training, $20,000. Repairs and maintenance costs are up about $22,000. Fleet and auto parts are up $20,000. Fleet outside services, so when we send a vehicle out to be repaired, $20,000. Vehicle fuel is down $18,000. Winter treatment supplies, so our salt and sand and materials, up $107,000. Electricity is up $43,000. Transfer to solid waste is up $100,000, and there are small increases in various other expense lines. Also, you'll notice included in the budget are under general services are 2 supplemental reports on page 130. The first section shows the costs associated with the downtown services program. Fiscal year 24 budget to budget increase is $18,000 due to wage and benefit increases. That's really the big increase there. The second supplemental report is for snow and ice control. Expense budget to budget are up $159,000 is due to wage and benefit increases of $40,000. Professional services of $12,000. That's bringing in additional help. And winter treatment, again, supplies up $107,000. So this is just a portion of what I just talked about earlier, just to call it out. Again, for fiscal year 24, we're expecting significant price increases for salt and salt supplies. That's why you can see that number's up. So we completed fiscal year 22-23 winter season. The updated winter maintenance supplies budget for salt is expected to be overspent by more than $120,000. So we really had a relatively light winter, but it just shows you the increase of what was happening with salt. Be glad to answer any questions regarding general services.
Thank you. That's great.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. City Manager, I appreciate you talking about the fact that we had a mild winter. And I do see in the snow and ice control that there are some expenses that went down, some expenses that went up. And I think if you could speak to the greater issues that happen with regards to a mild winter versus a heavy winter that happens on the snow loads and the freezing of the road. We're built, if I can lead you in a direction perhaps to what I'm trying to talk about. We're built in a climate that relies on snow. We expect ground to freeze. And when ground freezes, we expect that there's going to be a certain level of our concrete and pavement that is frozen during the winter months. And then with the melt, we expect some frost heaves. When we don't have a frozen ground, it creates greater damage on our streetscape. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's why you see the closing of our heavy truck traffic during the winter, particularly as we're starting moving from winter into spring, is because that pounding on that and the amount of large commercial vehicles we have on the street, basically because of that reason.
So when we're looking at our budget for 2024, we're still budgeting for a worst winter, or a typical winter that we would have in this area, and not something milder.
That's correct. And then if it ends up coming in over, then we end up, I keep you informed on that, and then we end up spending those dollars. And that's not only for overtime, but in materials, in fuel.
but there's all kinds of other elements associated with that. In the past, you've either that's reduced, you've overspent, we've overspent, and that has reduced potential surpluses throughout the entire budget, or you've had to, in some extreme cases, you've had to reduce other budget line items throughout the organization within general services to cover those costs.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Ms. Fennessy?
Thank you. Mr. City Manager, given the increased prices we've seen with salt, are there alternatives? Are we exploring any alternatives? Has anybody come up with a better solution?
These are the alternatives. Going out there and doing pretreatment. And I'll just give you an example. Salt per ton in 21-22 season was about $54 a ton. This last year was $70 a ton. That's, we're waiting for prices to come in soon for what it's going to be going forward. And if you use treated materials in 2021-22, it was about $70. Now it's about $89. So it's just, that's the way it's going. So we have really tried. You've been really good about funding salters and sanders that are very high tech, calibrated. We're very careful about the amount of materials that gets put out there, but you also, to make sure that our emergency vehicles can respond. People know when they get to Concord because the conditions of the roads are so much superior to what all the surrounding communities. But that's the way the people of Concord have asked for it in the past. So that's the level we keep it at.
Councilor Harkins.
Thank you. I just had a general question about the transfer in. I noticed that the transfer in from properties like the arena and the airport are quite a bit more than the golf course, and I was just curious what that difference is.
It's based on, Brian, if you could.
At the arena and the airport, there's a much higher level of presence of general services in those funds. So if you think about, let's use the airport, for example, general services does all the plowing of all the runways and things like that. So they have a much more direct expense impact, in that fund. So that's a higher reimbursement. Also, there's some overhead costs because general services oversees that department as well, that fund as well.
So, good question, because for example, if you look at conservation property, so General Services helps out and does the parking lots for the trail systems. So that's why you see that number in there. So it varies. Same thing with, the arena. There's a lot of work that goes on, a lot of plowing and whatnot that goes on at the arena, where you don't see that as much at the golf course.
I think that's why it jumped out to me, because does General Services not plow the parking lot for access for winter sports?
At the golf course?
Yeah.
As a rule, they do not. We have our own staff at the golf course that does all the plowing over there.
Along those lines, so I was happen to be at the golf course several times during the winter where General Service would call the golf course because they needed help for additional plowing and such. Does General Service then transfer dollars to the golf course for the services they're providing for General Services?
When somebody from the golf course goes over to General Services to help for plowing, typically those dollars are charged directly to like the winter maintenance budget. So it's not an overhead charge, or it's not that kind of direct charge. It's just charged directly to that budget during that time.
I appreciate how the synergy they have between each other to work together.
They work very well. There's a lot of back and forth between General Services and the golf course, and they work. We appreciate all the help they provide us, and we try to reciprocate when possible.
Anybody else? Councilor Pierce.
Quick question on the TIFs. These revenue numbers on page 128. These are those are revenue. Yeah, these are your revenue numbers. That's a portion of the TIF that comes to General Services for the maintenance of the roads and so on and so forth.
Infrastructure, that's correct.
Yeah, okay,
That's right.
thank you.
Councilor Nine.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Manager, Appendix B, item number 192, PCI request for emerging department leadership. Relatively small dollar item, 1467. It was not put in the budget. What is that line item? What is it? That was 192.
It's training dollars.
Training.
Well, I could actually, if you would like to have somebody from General Services explain, because it's a good program. But it's something that just, there's only so much money to go around.
Please, thank you.
Sure. Thanks.
In large part, I think the success of General Services is brought by our key personnel, and our key personnel are our division heads. And as you just heard earlier, how people coordinate resources on an as-needed basis. And as I look about my particular department, I see an aging group of division heads. I don't know if that's the right term to use, but it's a factual term. And I see a significant turnover in General Services into senior level management in the next 3 years. Significant. And the purpose of this program was to start to develop and foster an environment of folks within the department that can come up to those positions. If you look at our organization, in my view, it makes an awful lot of sense. Every division has a particular function. Highways and utilities, I call them people who play in streets, but they're people who work in streets. I have people who work in buildings. I have people who work at a water plant, people who work at a wastewater plant. I have people who manage the rolling stock of the community. My department, of any department that you're going to talk to, has the broadest range of services. It also has the broadest need to cross-pollinate across those divisions. And my concern within my department is when I get below the division level, they're working so hard to achieve those specific objectives of those divisions that they're missing the opportunity to develop relationships and understanding of what the other divisions do. And that's what this program was to do, was to bring people together in a formal training program on a monthly basis. Also included in that training programs, we work with police and fire and other departments. Those folks know them that, as maybe Equipment Services knows them as customers. Wastewater has no knowledge of what police and fire does on a regular basis. But at a later stage in their career, they probably should start gaining that information. So we developed a program in-house, relatively small dollars, and I understand dollars are short, to put that training together. So that's,
And it's really a mirror program to the Flex Tech position, remember, that you funded, which is wildly successful, where we bring people in with talent, and then we're not quite sure where they want to be in the organization in General Services, so they're really tested out throughout the whole department, get a taste of everything, and then we find out, take measure of them, they take measure of us, we find a home for them to grow. But it's really very similar type of concept, to not in how it operates, but the whole thinking about getting people ready for positions in the organization.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Anyone else? Goes Brown.
Thank you. I'm looking at page 131, the 2024 goals. The first one lists increased public awareness and engagement through outreach, which includes media releases, newsletters, website updates, and social media. And I'm asking, in relation to the second goal, complete the approved road paving capital improvement project. I noticed that on one of the capital improvement projects is on Airport Road, and Overcomers Refugee Services is also on Airport Road. So I'm wondering what kind of outreach you'll do to that population that might not have the newsletter, website, or social media access. Will you connect directly with Clement Kagugu or members of the neighborhood that may be walking back and forth to for those services?
to be effective in outreach, I think you need to understand the broad range of people that you're trying to reach, and you are speaking to one particular fraction. And we work with those informal groups and formal groups to make sure they understand what we're trying to achieve. We offer to go out to meet them in their world, not have them come to our world. I remember this was kind of funny, working with a young gentleman who was actually trying to apply for a job, and he was on his phone trying to use an app, and here I'm the oldest guy in the department, and I could use a slide rule with him, and we both kind of stumbled through the application together. So we go out and we try to reach for those folks, because it's a special need.
Excellent.
So we contact everybody with any project that we're doing along the road system
Excellent.
sidewalks.
Thank you.
And then take us because they know better, they live there, or they work there, they know better than we do about what's needed.
Thank you.
Well, I don't want to spend much time on this, but I just want to comment quickly on the goal number 3, which is talk about enhancing core services through the management request through the C-Click Fix. So C-Click Fix, in my opinion, has actually been a wildly successful tool that the city's used over time. And I think, when you look at the status from the 9 months of just what he did in the current fiscal year, General Services alone received what they say 1,687 requests. It talks about curbside trash collection, tree requests, road requests, requests for winter operations, et cetera. So I just wanted to, one, be extremely complimentary that how quickly the departments and the city responds to these requests. So I'm going to add one caveat, though, that I'm finding, though, the success we're having with it, there's becoming an expectation from members of the community that if I put something on there, then it will happen. It may be a policy change that they're suggesting, that the expectation that it's going to happen. So I think sometimes this is just a generalized comment, because you all really do respond very, very quickly, is that sometimes I think we have to manage expectations, particularly around this. And I'll share one last thing with you that I've noticed recently, that even counselors have been using the C-Click Fix as opposed to making an actual formal request to the manager, so that a referral then would happen and would go through the necessary process. So I would request that no counselor use this unless it's your own personal thing, I guess. But if you're doing it for a constituent, make that traditional request to the manager so that we can get something in the pipeline and actually follow something. We can respond back to the council and to the constituent. But I think there's a bigger discussion to be had about C-Click Fix, because I've just noticed the trend. If you don't know about something, then that's not a good thing. I think I'm finding that employees within the city get that request, and they believe they're expected to complete it, even though it may not even be a priority for us. Right. So it's an extremely useful, important tool, but like with any tool, it can be manipulated, how it's managed and such. So I just share that with you.
Understood.
I can understand that point. Some of our responses on a 99% closure is, no, we can't do that for these reasons. So that's a closed request. And council should understand that the way our C-Click Fix system is designed, that every one of those comes in can be seen immediately by a superintendent level position. So it is monitored for those types of issues that can come up with such a system.
Anyone else?
Can I just follow up on your comment?
Sure.
I'm one of those counselors that use it on behalf of my constituents when they call me, because I thought there was a tracking system that sort of kept track of if there's an ongoing issue, it would raise a flag. So is what I'm hearing you say that we should go through the city manager?
That way that way the manager knows about what is going on.
Or coach the citizen to use C-Click Fix. That's the best way to do it.
Councilor Hawkins.
I am also one of those counselors who uses that, but I would say I think actually it is a better process because we only meet once a month. So if we have a pothole or broken culvert or just trash cleanup along the side of the street and have a elderly member who doesn't feel comfortable using the program, then it is something that I'll use. and then I get a response when it's been taken care of, or a response back about why it will not be. And if it's something that's more significant, then I bring it forward in the other channels. But I actually do think it's a good process for us, because then we also get alerted and we can more quickly address some of the constituent concerns in our neighborhood that are pretty routine most of the time.
If you chose to use it, that's fine. I'm just asking a courtesy to let the manager know as well, that's all. Anybody else? All right, we'll have a public hearing on general services. Anybody wish to testify on anything with general services?
Good evening again, everybody. I'm still Roy Schweiker, and once again, this is kind of on the borderline between the capital budget and the operating budget. My understanding was that during COVID, we had to pick up the leaves with leaf loaders instead of with a vacuum, but I thought this was a temporary measure that was going to revert back. But now I see there's an item for buying another leaf loader, and I would like to say, let's not buy that. Let's go back to the vacuums. I think the leaf loaders are, in my neighborhood, pretty much of a disaster. It's much harder for them to get all the stuff in among the houses and parked cars and stuff that blows, pieces of leaves up in the air, which, blow into people's yards and stuff, depending on how windy it is. And once again, some streets seem to have the sweeper come by, right after that and clean the mess up. But in our case, it doesn't seem to happen for like 3 or 4 days, so the pieces of leaves blow around even more. So I would really like to, let's go back to the vacuums and get rid of the leaf loaders and don't buy any more of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? See that? Appreciate that. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to testify? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. And that concludes our activities for this evening. Thanks everybody for their patience. I will just remind everybody that we are meeting again on Thursday, the 25th. We'll be talking about community development departments. We'll be talking about the library, parks and recreation, human services, and we'll also be reviewing the capital improvement program, which includes both the TIP districts and all the capital projects. So May 25th, Thursday, we'll see you all here at 5:30. My last comment I'd like to make is if there was an MVP tonight, I would like to award the MVP award to Sean for having the most patience of anyone in the room. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second, all fair
I just
say
have
aye.
one item. Your Honor, I have one item. The Red, White, and Blue is this weekend at Beaver Meadow Golf Course. It's the only 3-day tournament that's ever held in the city, and it's open to all golfers. You do have to have a established GIN handicap in order to golf in this tournament. Already, there are 54 players that are signed up for the tournament. It's expected to be the absolute largest tournament that we've ever had for this turnout, and it's a big one. It's like our own Masters. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks, Your Honor.
Okay.